Good morning, Willard Wildcats. It's Dr. Baxter with my husband, the other Dr. Baxter. And today on Books and Birthdays, we have some special birthdays to announce. So happy birthday on this Wednesday, April 22nd, to Mia B., Jeremiah E., Ashley H.M., and Chase B., our alum who turns 15 today. The IB attitude that we're celebrating in this month of April is independence. We've been talking a lot about independence, and independence means you do things on your own. You take charge of your own learning. And that is particularly defined in this word called agency that we've been talking about. Do you want to try to say it too? Agency. So today our reading is going to be a nice demonstration of agency, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But the learner profile characteristic that we are celebrating is being reflective. And being reflective means thinking about events, talking about them, thinking about decisions, deciding whether or not you made the right decision or not, and sharing that. And this is a great time as we're all staying at home to talk and discuss things with the people in your space. So today we are reading part of one of my favorite books, Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. And we're reading the part about the sorting hat. And the beautiful part about this book is that you're going to see Harry Potter take charge and create agency with his own thoughts and how he communicates with the sorting hat. So thank you, Dr. Baxter, for helping me read, and we will begin. Harry had never imagined such a strange and splendid place. It was lit by thousands of candles that were floating in midair over 4 long tables where the rest of the students were sitting. These tables were laid with glittering golden plates and goblets. At the top of the hall was another long table where the teachers were sitting. Professor McGonagall led the first years up here so that they came to a halt in a line facing the other students with the teachers behind them. The hundreds of faces staring at them looked like pale lanterns. In the flickering candlelight, dotted here and there among the students, the ghosts shone misty silver. Mainly to avoid all the staring eyes, Harry looked upward and saw a velvety black ceiling dotted with stars. He heard Hermione whisper, "It's bewitched to look like the sky outside. I read about it in Hogwarts, a history." It was hard to believe that there was a ceiling there at all, and that the great hall didn't simply open onto the heavens. Harry quickly looked down again as Professor McGonagall silently placed a 4-legged stool in front of the first years. On top of the stool, she put a pointed wizard's hat. This hat was patched and frayed and extremely dirty. Aunt Petunia wouldn't have let it in the house. Maybe they had to try and get a rabbit out of it, Harry thought wildly. That seemed the sort of thing. Noticing that everyone in the hall was now staring at the hat, he stared at it too. For a few seconds, there was complete silence. Then the hat twitched. A rip near the brim opened wide like a mouth, and the hat began to sing.
"Oh, you may not think I'm pretty, but don't judge on what you see. I'll eat myself if you can find a smarter hat than me. You can keep your bowlers black, your top hats sleek and tall, for I'm the Hogwarts sorting hat, and I can cap them all. There's nothing hidden in your head the sorting hat can't see. So try me on, and I will tell you where you ought to be. You might belong in Gryffindor, where dwell the brave at heart. Their daring nerve and chivalry set Gryffindors apart. You might belong in Hufflepuff, where they are just and loyal. Those patient Hufflepuffs are true and unafraid of toil. Or yet in wise old Ravenclaw, if you've a ready mind, for those of wit and learning will always find their kind. Or perhaps in Slytherin you'll make your real friends. Those cunning folks use any means to achieve their ends. So put me on, don't be afraid, and don't get in a flap. You're in safe hands, though I have none, for I'm a thinking cap."
The whole hall burst into applause. As the hat finished its song, it bowed to each of the 4 tables, and then became quite still again. "So we've just got to try on the hat?" Ron whispered to Harry. "I'll kill Fred. He was going on about wrestling a troll." Harry smiled weakly. Yes, trying on the hat was a lot better than having to do a spell, but he did wish they could have tried it on without everyone watching. The hat seemed to be asking rather a lot. Harry didn't feel brave or quick-witted or any of it at the moment. If only the hat had mentioned a house for people who felt a bit queasy. That would have been the one for him. Professor McGonagall now stepped forward holding a long roll of parchment. "When I call your name, you will put on the hat and sit on the stool to be sorted," she said. "Abbott Hannah." A pink-faced girl with blonde pigtails stumbled out of line, put on the hat, which fell right down over her eyes, and sat down. A moment's pause.
"Hufflepuff!"
shouted the hat. The table on the right cheered and clapped as Hannah went to sit down at the Hufflepuff table. Harry saw the ghost of the Fat Friar waving merrily at her. "Bones, Susan!"
"Hufflepuff!"
shouted the hat again, and Susan scuttled off to sit next to Hannah. "Boot, Terry!"
"Ravenclaw!"
The table, second from the left, clapped this time. Several Ravenclaws stood up to shake hands with Terry as he joined them. Brocklehurst Mandy went to Ravenclaw too, but Brown Lavender became the first new Gryffindor, and the table far left exploded with cheers. Harry could see Ron's twin brothers catcalling. Bulstrode Millicent then became a Slytherin. Perhaps it was Harry's imagination after all. He'd heard about Slytherin, but he thought they looked like an unpleasant lot. He was starting to feel definitely sick now. He remembered being picked for teams during gym at his old school. He had always been last to be chosen, not because he was no good, but because no one wanted Dudley to think they liked him. Finch, Fletchley, Justin.
"Hufflepuff!"
Sometimes Harry noticed that the hat shouted out the house at once, but at others, it took a little while to decide. Finnegan Seamus, the sandy-haired boy next to Harry in line, sat on the stool for almost a whole minute before the hat declared him Gryffindor. Granger, Hermione. Hermione almost ran to the stool and jammed the hat eagerly on her head.
"Gryffindor!"
shouted the hat. Ron groaned. A horrible thought struck Harry, as horrible thoughts always do. When you're very nervous, what if he wasn't chosen at all? What if he just sat there with his hat over his eyes for ages until Professor McGonagall jerked it off his head and said there had obviously been a mistake and he'd better get back on the train? When Neville Longbottom, the boy who kept losing his toad, was called, he fell over on his way to the stool. The hat took a long time to decide with Neville when finally it shouted,
"Gryffindor!"
Neville ran off, still wearing it, and had to jog back amid gales of laughter to give it back to MacDougall Morag. Malfoy swaggered forward when his name was called out and got his wish at once. The hat barely touched his head when it screamed,
"Slytherin!"
Malfoy went to join his friends Crabbe and Goyle, looking pleased with himself. There weren't many people left now. Moon, Nott, Parkinson, then a pair of twin girls, Patel and Patel, then Perks, Sally Ann, and then, at last, Potter, Harry. As Harry stepped forward, whispers suddenly broke out, like little hissing fires all over the hall. Potter, did she say? The Harry Potter? The last thing Harry saw before the hat dropped over his eyes was the hall full of people craning to get a good look at him. Next second, he was looking at the black inside of the hat. He waited. Said a small voice in his ear.
"Difficult. Very difficult. Plenty of courage, I see. Not a bad mind either. There's talent. Oh, my goodness, yes. And a nice thirst to prove yourself. Now that's interesting. So where shall I put you?"
Harry gripped the edges of the stool and thought, not Slytherin, not Slytherin.
"Not Slytherin, eh?"
The small voice said.
"Are you sure? You could be great, you know. It's all here in your head, and Slytherin will help you on your way to greatness. No doubt about that, no. Well, if you're sure, better be Gryffindor.
Harry heard the hat shout the last word to the whole hall. He took off the hat and walked shakily toward the Gryffindor table. He was so relieved to have been chosen and not put in Slytherin, he hardly noticed that he was getting the loudest cheer yet. Percy, the prefect, got up and shook his hand vigorously while the Weasley twins yelled, "We got Potter! We got Potter!" Harry sat down opposite the ghost in the rough he'd seen earlier. The ghost patted his arm, giving Harry the sudden, horrible feeling he just plunged it into a bucket of ice-cold water. He could see the high table properly now. At the end nearest him sat Hagrid, who caught his eye and gave him the thumbs up. Harry grinned back, and there, in the center of the table, in a large gold chair, sat Albus Dumbledore. Harry recognized him at once from the card he'd gotten out of the chocolate frog on the train. Dumbledore's silver hair was the only thing in the hall that shone as brightly as the ghost. Harry spotted Professor Quirrell, too, the nervous young man from the Leaky Cauldron. He was looking very peculiar in a large purple turban. And then there were only 3 people left to be sorted. Thomas Dean, a boy even taller than Ron, joined Harry at the Gryffindor table. Turpin Lisa became a Ravenclaw, and then it was Ron's turn. He was pale green by now. Harry crossed his fingers under the table, and a second later the hat shouted,
Gryffindor!
Harry clapped loudly with the rest as Ron collapsed into the chair next to him. "Well done, Ron. Excellent," said Percy Weasley pompously across Harry as Zablini Balaise was made a Slytherin. Professor McGonagall rolled up her scroll and took the sorting hat away. Well, we hope you enjoyed that excerpt from Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, and thank you for reading with me, Dr. Baxter. He reads this with college students, so it's really fun to read this with all of you. Wildcats, remember, we are safe, respectful, and responsible, and in order to be safe this month, we're staying at home. Have a wonderful Wednesday.